All right, looks like we have a good number of people who joined, so I'll begin. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our new series called APA-IL PlanNotes. This series was organized by the APA-IL Professional Development Committee, who is newly formed this year. I'm Gabrielle Mattingly, chair of the Professional Development Committee, and myself and the committee members are dedicated to providing high-quality professional development. So the concept for this series stemmed from the idea that we as planners are often faced with complex issues that we were not taught how to manage in school. So APA-IL PlanNotes is going to be your Cliff Notes guide to how to deal with management. So our first topic of this series today is discussing how to manage elected officials. As part of the planning for this session, we look to you, the audience, to provide questions that you've been faced with on how to manage elected officials. So we will be using breakout rooms during today's sessions to discuss those questions and respond to them. So in the breakout rooms, when we do go to that portion of the session, you will each, as your team in your breakout room, you will each have 3 scenarios to respond to. And then we will be using Jamboard to discuss those scenarios, and you will need to select a member of your breakout room who will be taking notes in response to the questions. So like I said, amongst your team, you will need to select someone who will be taking notes. And when we move to the breakout rooms, the note taker will need to notify us that they will be the note taker, and we will provide you with the link to the Jamboard. So our guest speakers for today's session are Rob Kowalski and Kimberly Porter. Rob Kowalski has been the Assistant Director of the Planning and Development Department for the City of Champaign for the past 16 years. He has over 25 years of municipal planning experience in both Illinois and Kentucky. Rob also holds an adjunct teaching position in the Department of Urban and Regional Planning at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. His class focuses on land development process from the perspective of both planners and developers. He is certified with the American Institute of Certified Planners, and in 2018, he became a fellow with the AICP College of Fellows. He graduated from Illinois State University with a bachelor's degree in geography and has a master's degree in urban and regional planning from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Kimberly Porter has been the Community Development Director for the Village of Woodbridge since January 2018. She previously served as a program management manager at Regional Transportation Authority, as well as Director of Economic and Community Development for the Village of University Park, Illinois. Kim's focuses areas include policy and program implementation related to land use, regional and sustainable community development, and access to transit. She has been a member of the American Planning Association for approximately 19 years and a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners for 12 years. She received a bachelor's degree in sociology with an emphasis in urban studies from North Central College in Naperville, and a master's degree in urban planning and policy from the University of Illinois at Chicago. So a couple of items to note before we begin: please keep yourself muted as the guest speakers begin talking, and thank you for submitting your questions. If you do not see your question discussed today, please be on the lookout for our next sessions within this series, as we may discuss those questions at that time. Towards the end of our session today, we will share a link to a survey and where you can submit your CM credits, so be on the lookout for that. And now I will turn it over to Colleen Malik, who is a planner for the Village of Mundelein, and she is a member of the Professional Development Committee. Colleen?
Hi, everyone. So I just want to explain quickly how the Jamboard works. You'll see all of the scenarios based on your questions that you wrote in on this Google Jamboard. And if you've never used it before, Jamboard functions kind of like a shared Google Doc where multiple people can edit it together in real time. And we have a slide for each breakout room. And so your group's designated note taker is going to turn your group's answers and what you're talking about into notes on Jamboard, where everybody will be able to see it. You can take your notes however you want to. There's sticky notes, text boxes. You can even put in pictures or draw with the pen tool, however you want to convey your group's thoughts on this Jamboard slide. And the note taker does not need to present these thoughts or, say them out loud at any point. It's purely note taking. And then also, I just want to point out that we included a column on the right side of each Jamboard slide. You can type in questions for our speakers, Rob and Kim, and they'll try to either type back an answer or address it in our Q&A if we have time. So we're just going to start off before we go into our breakout rooms with just a one question Jamboard demonstration with our speakers to show you how it works. So I'm going to turn it over to Rob and Kim, and Gabby will be taking notes on the Jamboard. And so our $1 million question is, how do you make elected officials do the right thing? And I'll turn it over to Rob and Kim.
That's a tough one.
Yeah, it's I don't know if the Jamboard's big enough for the answer that would be required there, but
I know, is this a safe space?
yeah, right. I'll start, I guess, with some ideas and some thoughts. I think first you have to ask the question, what does it mean to be doing the right thing? I think the planning profession is, as you all know, a bit of a blend between objective standards and subjective principles. So, some of the objective standards that we work with are things like findings of fact for a zoning case, a special use permit, a due process for a public hearing, those kinds of things. Ensuring that your elected officials follow those established standards, those legal standards, is obviously very important for many reasons, many legal reasons. So how do you make sure they do the right thing? Well, that's really with training for those kinds of standards and clear explanation of what those standards are. But then we have a lot of subjective principles, and that's what makes our profession so interesting. Whether or not our community should have more commercial development or more residential development, or should we narrow a street to have a bike lane or not? This isn't something that is necessarily right or wrong, but is a little more subjective. So some of us may see those things as definite right answers. Yes, you should narrow the street and have a bike lane. That's the right thing to do. Sure. But it is subjective nonetheless. So in those cases, I think you're talking more about training. You're talking about comprehensive plans. You're talking about having a solid foundation of planning in your community for what you want to move forward. And then it's our job as planners to work with our elected officials to implement those goals. So I'll stop there and maybe let Kim add some thoughts too, if I didn't take them all.
No, I think thanks, Rob. I think that was a great beginning to this particular response. I think for our colleagues out there who work in maybe smaller communities or communities where there isn't budget for training for elected officials, or your elected officials may not be interested in getting together for various trainings. I think one way of hopefully making your elected officials behave properly is by leading by example. I think our strongest tool as a planner is doing our homework and being prepared with knowledge and facts. And I think that when you continue to carry yourself as a professional and being that go-to person that spends time doing their homework and understanding an issue, all the facets, as many facets of an issue that you can, I think that sets the tone for elected officials to want to go along with you. Oftentimes, how can someone go along with you if they can't get along with you, so to speak? And so I think for our colleagues that are in those types of communities where they don't have budget for training for elected officials, or they have elected officials that have major egos and don't feel like they need that level of training, I think remaining professional and making sure that you've done your homework can assist you in making elected officials do the right thing as well? I mean, that's a really tough question. This is truly $1 million question. If I knew the real answer, I would quit planning and consult on this topic.
So I know some of you, if you're a city planner at a municipality, a city, a village, a town, which probably are many of you on the call, like me and Kim, you know, you either work for a city manager form of government or a strong mayor form of government. I worked for both. I currently am in a city manager form of government, and they function very differently in terms of staff planners having to work with elected officials. Oh, I'm sorry, that was a poll question. Yeah, it's a good one. Strong mayor form of government can be more challenging. You may have more direct contact, right, with city council members, elected officials. City manager form of government, ideally things kind of channel through your city manager's office a little more, and they shield you a bit from having that regular contact. Sorry, I'm answering the poll question here. So, you know, the form of government you work with is going to have a huge impact on how you relate to and how you talk to elected officials. But the final comment that I'll offer on this point is that there really is such a high value in doing relationship building with your elected officials. In my 25 years experience, I've seen a real change with who's coming on board as elected officials. Back in the day, it used to be that citizens would kind of climb through the ranks, if you will, of joining a board or commission and then be on another board or commission and really be ingrained in city politics, and then eventually be a city council member. And today that still happens, but you also have a lot of people that are kind of doing the couch to council approach as well, where they get charged on an issue, they run, they're effective at campaigning, and they get elected, and they don't have a lot of that background. So you need to build a relationship with them and not assume that they know all about planning and everything you do and what is right and what is wrong in terms of the planning profession and some of our best practices. And I think we also have a tendency to believe that, you know, these are our bosses, right? And it can be even intimidating, especially if you're newer in your career. But most of my experience is that they want to learn from you quite a bit and take the time to try and get to know them, talk to them, share best practices, and, you know, try and get them to buy in our culture of planning that we've been working so hard to push forward.
Definitely. And don't try to change your elected official. You know, they are who they are. What you want is try to figure out ways of how to work better with them. You want to understand their needs and what it is that they're seeking. You know, you have to understand that elected officials must posture to their public. And if there is a good rapport with your department and the elected officials, a lot of times they set the stage, hey, I'm going to say this and this and this and this and this. Oftentimes we are often blindsided in a meeting when an elected official starts to, you know, go on a rant about something. And so understand, you have to really learn and stay in tune and understand when your elected officials are posturing to the public from what the real issues are. And that can be difficult, and it takes a lot of paying attention. That's a part of you building up your toolbox, your planner's toolbox, your skill set is trying to discern that. What is just political posturing, and then what are the real issues that they're trying to get at so that you can best, you know, assist them.
So those are our thoughts. Question number one.
How much do I win?
Did we get it right? Did we get it right?
Well, thank you, Rob and Kim. I know it really is the $1 million question, and there really is we could talk about this forever because there's just so many responses you could go with. So I think now is a great time to split up into our breakout rooms and start discussing the scenarios that we have created based on the questions attendees have submitted. So as a reminder, when you are in your breakout rooms, you will need to dedicate one person to be the note taker for your breakout room, and they will need to return to the main room in order to obtain a link to Jamboard. So I believe Paula will be splitting you up into breakout rooms. Well, thank you everyone for discussing the questions in your breakout rooms. The breakout rooms each had different questions and different scenarios that you were looking at and discussing. So our lovely guest speakers will be responding to your questions or your responses and discussing the questions. But please note that all of the answers and the questions will be shared with you following this session. So if you wanted to look at some of the answers that people submitted, we will provide this via email to you following the session. So Rob and Kim, take it away. And I'm sharing my screen, but let me know where you want me to move to.
Okay.
Okay, thanks. Like the rest of you are getting familiar with Jamboard here a bit. I haven't used it myself either, but it looks like a pretty awesome tool. Thank you for your patience in getting it working. While you were in your groups, Kim and I have been watching the comments that you've been typing and popping up on the different Jamboards. So we're able to scroll through the slides. There's about 15 questions total and kind of see what the answers are that are popping up. And I guess that's what's going to be shared with you later. So the approach that we thought we would take is just take a few of these questions, as many as time allows, I guess, and then offer our thoughts on those situations and maybe share some personal situations that, or professional situations, I should say, that we've been in that kind of relates to some of these.
Mm-hmm.
So Kim, you want to introduce the first question that we'll talk about?
Yeah, so I am interested in the third question in breakout group 1, if that's okay. In the first group, yeah. So it's the Councilman Chris continuously makes offline promises to residents and businesses that cannot be fulfilled. How should staff handle this issue? This is a really good one. I think this is probably something that we all have or will experience at some point in our careers. And my take on this is that I don't know if you should. How would you intervene? Are you going to contact the councilman and say, hey, you shouldn't be making promises as a planner, and no matter if you're the director or the senior planner or the entry level planner? I think, again, for me, my take on this and my experience with this has been, again, arming yourself with the knowledge and the facts. You know, it's important to educate our elected officials. You can provide an elected official training, a coloring book and crayons. You can provide them with all the information in the world, and ultimately they're going to do what they want to do because there is an element of politics and posturing that goes on. My perspective, and I would tell my team all the time, is it's our job to remain ethical at all times and make sure we provide the knowledge and facts. And so unfortunately, that information gets shared, and sometimes in our own house meaning where we work. And it's our job to make sure that we are educating our elected officials when we can and when we're allowed to, but also those residents and potential applicants. So it's important to say, you know, this that's great that you had the opportunity to talk to Councilman Chris, but please allow me to also provide you additional information on what the process looks like and what the process entails. Because again, you're the staff, you're the knowledgeable one, and it's your job to make sure that you don't want to paint the councilman out to be an idiot, or saying, oh, they told you all this bad information. You don't want to open the conversation like that. But what you do want to do is provide them information. Let me give you more information on the process for this or the process for that. Oh yeah, I'm hearing rumors that an Amazon distribution facility is going in next door to a church, and that's not what's happening. So again, it's making sure that you provide knowledge and facts at all times.
Yeah, so this was a good one. Probably, I was looking for, like all the questions, I was looking for a little more background information. So again, the question is, Councilmember Chris continuously makes offline promises to residents and businesses that cannot be fulfilled. How should staff handle the issue? My first question to the question, which is, planners are great at asking questions to questions, I know that. But what kind of promises are we talking about? What kind of promises is Chris making to residents? If it is promises about, oh, I can make sure that you get that variance, or I can make sure we get that land rezoned for you, or go ahead and encroach your building 5 feet into a side yard setback that requires 10. Well, those are promises that Councilmember Chris just can't make. And actually, those are probably the easiest for staff to respond to, because if you're not authorized to allow something that's otherwise prohibited in a code, you just can't do it without a process. Probably the more trickier ones are when council members promise work of your planning departments to the community that you're not prepared for in your work plan. So yeah, neighborhood group, I promise I'll get the planning staff to start doing a neighborhood study of the housing conditions in this area. That's a priority of mine, so I'm going to get the staff to start working on that. And then, of course, you say, well, that's not in our work plan. You know, some other council member asked us to work on something else, and we're doing that right now. Those issues come up quite frequently, and you have to appreciate, I've come to appreciate that council members have these passion things that they want to do, and when they run, you know, they really want to achieve these certain projects, and they don't have a full understanding of what's the work plan of the planning department, what are the priorities, et cetera. And that's where the relationship building comes in to make sure that your city council does understand what are the priorities of your department. In Champaign, we have a way of tracking our baseline services and our projects. So baseline services are the things, you know, customer service, zoning administration, reviewing permits, things that we have to do every day. And then we quantify how much time we have available to work on projects. And if a council member comes to us and says, I want you to start working on this new project, you know, we do have a conversation that says, well, if the rest of the council wants us to do that, and that's the direction, we have to take something else off the table. And that decision has to be made. So we try and impress upon them that, you know, we have a set work plan and we're progressing in that way. But changes can come up all the time, and you can get new direction from your city council. But I think it's mostly a relationship building exercise myself.
And is there a strategic? We have strategic planning when we meet with our elected officials. And so if there are pet projects that they're interested in, that's the time when that gets vetted amongst all of their peers, so that there isn't that, you know, staff time is just as valuable, and we have to allocate our time to, you know, our applicants, our residents, I mean, any and everybody. And so if there are neighborhood corridor studies that are being sought, the strategic planning process for our elected officials is where that comes out. And so if you're the leader of that department, you're the leader of the ship, so to speak, and you don't have those type of strategic planning processes in place for your elected officials, so that that's their safe space when they can talk about what projects they want to see happen, to somewhat formalize that so that you know what you're anticipating. So if you do get, you know, an outlier, hey, we want to do this. This is something, a new issue in my district. I want to do this. You can say, well, you know, respectfully, you know, we set out our work plan for the year, you know, and maybe we can, you know, talk about adding this to the work plan, whether the work for that year or maybe for a subsequent year. But I think those type of strategic planning processes with your elected officials helps somewhat abate those issues of having those spur of the moment work plans being thrusted upon you. It doesn't get rid of them all the time, depending on the community you work for, but at least there's a process so that they know, okay, I can add this to my agenda item when we meet to strategically plan for the upcoming year.
All right, which one should we go to next, Kim?
Oh, let's see. Let's see what breakout group number 2 was working on. Oh, let's look at this. Paul Planner. Paul explained to his elected officials that resident comments are not fact. How do you approach elected officials who defer to resident comments in favor of actual best practices? Oh, this is a good one. Okay, Rob, you start this one off.
Right. I thought this was a great question. It's a little loaded too. And it looks like group 2 had a lot of comments. Paul, I'm double checking. Can the participants see what the comments are on the Jamboard? Okay, so I don't really need to read those. You can read them. My thought is, you know, resident comments. If you're say at a public hearing or a neighborhood meeting and residents are giving comments, they're always a mixture of facts, personal opinion, and sometimes misinformation. Sometimes well-intentioned, but they're just misinformed. But there's always a mix of facts and personal opinions. And so, you need to be able to parse out when you're talking about something that's factual or when they're talking about something that's their opinion. They have the right to comment as they wish, of course, and you have the right to follow up with accurate information that may correct some of those facts or cite something differently. The tricky part comes in debating best practices, and that's the end of this question about actual best practices. Well, best practices typically isn't something that's either fact or not fact. It's usually, if you think it's a best practice that we have more mixed use in the community, that's more of a value judgment than, somebody may say, I think the community should be more single family residential for that kind of thing. So you may, as a planner, believe strongly in your heart that it is the best practice to have a mixed use community, but it's probably going a little too far to say it is a fact that all communities should be mixed use. And if you feel differently, you're just wrong. So you probably need to, be able to distinguish those two things. I would suggest, in your staff presentations, try to anticipate how resident comments will attack those best practices, and include that in your presentation about what things are happening around the country, other best practices that are going on. Cite factual information that you can use to build the case for example, having a mixed use community. And don't just assume that your elected officials are on board with all of your best practice planning best practices that we subscribe to, because they may need some education and some ability to kind of learn about these best practices as well. And at the last thing I'll say is, have some respect for residents that come up and are giving their opinion, whether you agree with it or not.
That was perfect, Rob. I mean, you have to remember, our elected officials are also residents. And so they may share those opinions or what they deem as facts. And so that you don't want to step into a landmine by putting your foot in your mouth by trying to say, well, no. Again, it's maybe somewhat quelling your own professional ego when you want to be able to say, don't listen to these residents. No, what we're saying here, what staff is saying is fact. It's the mantra. This is what you need to review. This is what you need to be able to make your decision on, because it's not always like that. A lot of times Rob talked about this earlier, how being an elected official has changed. And so some people are passionate about something and they get elected, and now they're there to push their own neighborhood agenda or their own personal agenda. And so again, it's about us being able to respect the process, and residents have the right to participate in that particular process. And we may not agree with what they're saying, but again, it's always going back to those knowledge and facts and providing that information, because ultimately the elected official is going to vote the way they want to vote.
Hey, Kim, I think this kind of naturally takes us to the Lisa question on the same breakout group.
Oh, yeah.
You want to do that one?
Yeah. Is it on the, number 3. I'll
let you start it.
So what is it? Lisa works for a department that handles, I can't even see this now, I'm squinting. Can you zoom in a wee bit? Thank you, my old eyes. And go down for a wee bit. Okay, yes. Okay, thank you. Lisa works for a department that handles numerous residential development requests. Despite Lisa advocating for a mix of residential product types in the city, several council members view the proposed residential projects through the lens of whether they would personally enjoy living there. This has resulted in difficulty passing any residential products that are not low density, single family housing. How can staff help the elected officials look at decisions through the lens of creating a healthy, sustainable community? Oh, I feel like someone was spying on me when they wrote this scenario. Oh, this is a great question. Oh, this is a good one. This is a tough one. I've actually, and my staff that's in here in this Zoom room, they're probably suffering from PTSD. This is something that we've experienced just prior to the pandemic of trying to, and ultimately the applicant pulled. So we didn't even get the chance to go before our village board, because they were just so fed up at the plan commission level and all the resident outcry regarding this residential development that they were just like, we're over, we're done. 2 hours prior to the meeting. And so Planner Phil Green, who's in the room, was in the parking lot crying. I barely was getting out of my car to get a cup of coffee. And he's in the parking lot waiting on me, crying, saying, hey, this project is pulled. So I get this. So this is a tough one. How can you help your elected officials look at decisions, or in our case, appointed officials, which is our plan commission that tore this applicant to shreds based on resident comments and concerns? How can you get officials to look at decisions through the lens of creating a healthy, sustainable community? You know, I see one comment that says examples of success. Do you have other examples of success, whether it's preferably in your own community, but if not, sometimes communities covet other communities. Oftentimes you'll have elected officials says, we want to be more like that community. How can we be like that? We like the way their houses look. We like the way their blocks look, their corridors look. And so taking those type of examples that you hear some of them say, you may hear us being in tune with what your elected officials are constantly talking about and paying attention, and to be able to say, okay, they like how this community looks. So let's pull in those examples of success and what a healthy, sustainable community looks like. Because a lot of times your officials may not know what that means. They may not know what that looks like. And so a lot of times if people are visual, you have to kind of show that to them and paint the picture of this is what this community can look like. And a lot of times you have to do that sort of visioning exercises with your residents as well, to show them this is how this would look within the context of our community in order to obtain buy-in. So you got to get really creative on how do you obtain buy-in. That may mean you may need to put together a tour of other communities and show this is what a healthy mix of residential developments looks like. You know, I've done that in previous positions, and, you know, sometimes it's been really successful and other times, you know, it wasn't, but thinking outside the box and being creative, I think can be very helpful and can be key to a situation like this.
Yeah, this is a great question, and it's very common with volunteer-based boards and commissions and city councils, elected officials. I mean, they're in a way volunteering to run for city council and serve that role. I have been presented to Plan Commission one time on an apartment complex or a housing development of some type. And I remember questions from the commission started coming in about, well, what are the kitchens going to be like? Are there going to be granite countertops? Oh, are there going to be fireplaces in there? And you know these questions are more about their personal interest in the homes and not the land use pattern or the zoning or anything like that. And you try and steer them away from that. Look, we're not talking about the tile in the kitchens here. And so I think it's natural for them to do that, and they're interested in their own values and how that looks. I think the best defense for this is to be able to highlight your adopted plans and policies to say what the values of the community are. Hopefully, you have a comprehensive plan. Preferably with a map that says in this area, our community would really like to see mixed use development, not single family, low density developments. And you as a staff planner can get up and point to that plan and say, this is what our community has adopted. This is the policy that we set forward and we should go. If you don't have that, then it's all just a back and forth volley of everyone's value of whether single family is okay, mixed use is okay, and you're gonna be down that road with your boards and commissions of talking about the tile and the fireplaces. So this is not an overnight fix. If you don't have those kinds of plans and policies, obviously that's something to work on and get those in place. Have workshops with your boards and commissions on regular basis to look at those plans and, kind of remind everybody, this is the direction we wanted to go in this part of the community, et cetera. Force them to make the decision in the face of a plan or a policy that states that the city wants mixed residential housing types. And I mean, force them to make a decision otherwise and have to defend that. You're going to be on your best footing as a staff planner saying, we've gone through these processes, people have given comments, you've adopted these, this is what staff recommends. If ultimately your city council wants to choose differently, they're most likely going to have the right to do that. But you've advocated for what your community wanted through that adopted plan process.
Great point, Robin. If your community doesn't have a comp plan, outdated comp plan, or maybe this is a different area in which will require some sort of comp plan amendment that doesn't necessarily call for, let's say, high density in this particular area, but it's been 27,000 years since you've done your comp plan. And now, you know, your community has changed and you're seeing a particular area morph into something a bit more mid to higher density. That's when sometimes those visioning exercises can come in handy. Those tours, community tours can come in handy where you can say, well, this is what this type of development looks like in other communities to help substantiate what it is you may be trying to recommend for that particular community. I mean, your community in that particular area of the community.
You want to go to the hotel?
Yeah, let's go to the hotel. So breakout group number 3. I like this third question. So the beautiful historic landmark hotel would like to do some facade work and is coming to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a variation. Mayor Mike wants to demolish the hotel, and outside of meetings, he tries influencing ZBA officials. How do you respond? So it looks like breakout group 3 stated that they bring this up to the city manager's attention if applicable or highest level of the department. Who should advise Mayor Mike that the conversations are a violation of the Open Meetings Act? Right, basically, who should, you know, advise Mayor Mike that you're behaving somewhat badly, right, in this particular process? So, do you have historic landmark districts down where you are, Rob?
Yeah, of course. In fact, a town next to ours has a historic landmark hotel. I don't think this is where the question comes from, but I don't know. I honestly don't.
No, you want to take a stab at it?
Well, yeah, I don't. Okay, so my thoughts on this one is, it's never a good idea for your elected officials to be talking with members of your zoning board of appeals outside of the public hearing for a case to convince them to do something otherwise. At best, it's unethical, but you should consult with your city's legal staff, your city attorney, to decide if there's something illegal going on here. And that is a good place to start. Don't feel like you're tattling. I understand this can be particularly tricky if you work in a strong mayor form of government and maybe you are appointed by that mayor. And I'll share an experience I had with that some years ago. But really, you need to make sure it's your ethical duty to make sure that things are being done ethically and legally. So don't be afraid to bring this up. If you think something nefarious is going on here, I've been in situations where city council members have come to a public hearing and stated their opinion on a case, maybe on behalf of their constituents, and ultimately they're going to have a vote on this case. That never feels right either, but at least in that case, they're doing it in a public hearing context, and they're coming to the microphone and it's on the record and it's out for the public. So having discussions kind of behind the scenes on it is a much more dicey situation. So I would consult some help with that issue. Longer term, what I would suggest is having more training with your zoning board of appeals, who are also volunteer members, just like your plan commission and other boards. So they are better equipped on how to handle outside communication on cases. There are some cases, if they're quasi-judicial public hearings, where they are not supposed to take outside comments from residents, let alone the mayor or any other elected official. And then other cases where it's okay, but they need to know what those are. Training sessions can really help them be better equipped to handle these situations. And often in my experience, these board members really crave that because they volunteered to be on a board. The mayor asked them to serve on it. They said yes. This isn't, part of their expertise in life, if you will. And so, it's on us to provide some high quality training that can help them handle those kinds of situations and maybe say, hey, Mayor, I understand, but I'm going to consider the facts of this case and act on that. So we'll talk about it after everything is done. Those are my thoughts.
Definitely. The training is one, talking to council is key. And depending on where you are in the hierarchy, having that conversation with your director and hoping that your director will move that forward to the attorney, to the general counsel, village attorney, whomever you use to provide law services to your respective community. And if that's you, having that conversation with your boss to say, hey, this is what's happening that's concerning. What's the next plan of attack, so that we can, so that we can assure that our ZBA members aren't feeling pressured to do something that they're not interested in doing. And also it's a gentle nudge to the Mayor Mike on, doing things the proper way, the ethical principles in planning, so to speak. And it's our job to remain ethical, right? And so when you're doing training, hopefully you're doing training through APA, right? But if you're not able to do training through APA, and you just have to be able to, conduct your own training, make sure you infuse those ethical principles in planning, because it's for those who are participating in the process of planning, right? And so you can always refer back to that, include that in their training documents. If you're providing articles, information from the planning magazine, a lot of times planning has different things for plan commissioners for them to read. Print that out, give it to them, and give them a copy of the ethical principles in planning. Put together packets with the staff report and give that to them. Hey, I saw some additional reading I thought was interesting that you might like, and give that to them. I mean, it's important to get that information out.
This actually would be a great ethics case of the year discussion, really, on this one.
It would, because I'm sure a lot of people are experiencing these types of behaviors and scenarios. So, for sure.
I'll quickly share a story from a different town I worked in other than Champaign. Strong mayor form of government. I had a city council member that was looking at buying a building, and the mayor did not want this person to buy the building because the mayor wanted to do something different with the building. The city council member asked me to come and do a zoning review of the building to, give a report on its compliance with zoning rules. I did that, which is part of my normal job responsibilities. And at the meeting, the city council member asked me to sign something that said I wouldn't tell the mayor that I went and looked at this building and provided the zoning information. It's kind of like a non-disclosure thing. To make this even more murky, this is a mayor that appointed me for my job in the first place. My ethics told me absolutely not. I can't sign something like that. I'm doing my job giving a zoning review. If someone in the city organization asks for my work on that, I'm not going to say, oh no, this is privileged information. I can't share it. So this situation that was presented is between a mayor and a zoning board member, but keep an eye out for those situations where you're going to find yourself in the middle of those situations, and be prepared for how you handle that ethically.
Great example. I have a quick one. Finishing my master's at UIC, it was 3 to 4 years after I got my master's degree. I was a city planner for a municipality here in Illinois, and director had quit, assistant director had quit. I wasn't privy to what was going on behind why they just abruptly resigned. The new mayor came to me and said one day, you're going to execute this document, or I'm going to have this police officer escort you out of here. I looked at the document. I said, I can't execute this. This isn't accurate. The zoning this was a bunch of misinformation. Yeah, I understand it's inaccurate, but you're going to execute it. I said, no, I'm not. And let me get my things, because I'm resigning. And this is 3 years into me being a new planner, 3 years out of graduate school. I quit a job after being there for maybe 6 months because it was being pushed on me to execute a document, incorrect zoning, and a host of other things in order to make the mayor look good. These are unfortunately the types of ethical issues that we are faced with. And it's one thing for a young Kim, the planner, to say, something, I quit, I'll look for another job because I didn't want, and I wasn't AICP certified at the time, but I knew ethically I couldn't do that. My job wasn't worth my integrity. And so I left. And so these are some of the issues that we are faced with. And I'd be more than happy to talk with you. I'm sure Rob would too, after this is all done with. We want to get back to some of these questions, but these are some of the issues that we are faced with. And, as planners at some point, and if you're not, you're so lucky, good job, and not being faced with those types of issues during your tenure as a planner. But it can be challenging, and sometimes you have to make some tough decisions.
Hey Kim, let's jump to breakout group number 4, Penelope Planner.
Ooh,
now,
yeah.
I'll read the question Penelope Planner received a Facebook request from one of her elected officials. She doesn't want to be official's Facebook friend. How can she ignore it without sabotaging the professional relationship? What are your thoughts?
I mean, usually I would just ignore people, but this is a professional setting. So, you know, I would take that request. I would go talk to my boss. You know, as if I'm one of the staff planners in the department, I'm going to go talk to the director. Hey, this older person has requested me being friends and like two of my beach pictures. That's not appropriate. What should I do? You know, I mean, I personally don't think that, and professionally, I think you need to keep a separation. Elected officials shouldn't be friends with you like that, you know, in your role as a planner, as a representative of that community, as representative, as a public servant. And so I would definitely don't accept that friend request and go talk to your boss as far as how to proceed with that. Because instead of you having to, you know, feel awkwardly having to decline or leave that request lingering, the hope is that you can get your boss to go talk to that elected official to know, hey, staff you can't be friending and liking bikini photos of staff here. You just got to say, hey, we have to keep this professional. So I would say definitely take that request to your boss and have them work with that elected official so that, hey, we can't be friends.
I would say I don't know about people on the call, of course, but I have never had anybody confront me because I didn't accept their friend request on Facebook. I'm sure it happens, but a lot of times you forget that you even asked, right? So yeah, I wouldn't accept it either. And if confronted about it, I would say that, you know, I so greatly appreciate the positive professional relationship we have. It's very collaborative and it works really well, that I don't want to potentially jeopardize that with, you know, the downsides of social media, particularly Facebook, where, you know, we both have to deal with residents complaining to both of us about a certain project or something that's happening in town, and then bringing that negativity to our, you know, great relationship. Perhaps you could, you know, suggest, you know, maybe following each other on Instagram instead, you know, which is, you know, I probably wouldn't go there either, but at least Instagram, you're just, you know, it's mostly pictures of kids and stuff like that. But Twitter's not a good idea either. But yeah, I wouldn't do it. I mean, obviously the question is angled towards not wanting to do it. And I wouldn't feel obligated just because they're your elected official that you need to be a good planner and be friends with your elected officials on Facebook because they want to. That's outside the box of what you need to be doing for them, in my opinion.
Yeah. Show that post to your boss so that they can handle that on your behalf.
We're running out of time, Kim. Where do we go next?
Oh. Let's go. Well, we got 2 more breakout sessions left. Let's go to breakout group number, where are we, 4 already? We need to go to 5?
Yeah, let's go to 5.
Okay. Okay, let's do Patrick Planner. Patrick Planner has seen several elected officials posting on social media about current projects, both on community group web pages and their own personal accounts. What are some social media best practices or policies that Patrick can share with the elected officials? That's a good question. What did this particular group say? Make sure they are posting, thank you. Make sure they are posted accurate and official info, provide them with info to be posted. Okay, they can post from the village post and share them. They can comment or post as individuals and not posting for the board as a whole. Okay, create a social media policy. I think that's a great idea. I think that if this was my particular situation and I saw this, I would, as a director of my department, go to my village administrator and say, hey, I'm noticing, I mean, the village has its own social media website and we put out content, but I'm noticing some of our elected officials are posting information that doesn't include all the facts. Maybe we need to create a social media policy. I would probably even draft one up and give it to my boss and say, hey, what do you think about this, so that so all of our elected officials have the same document to work from, because it's important that they champion their community. That's what they're elected for, and champion projects, but we want to make sure that they're doing it the right way. And if they have questions about a project, maybe staff can write up a blurb for them for posting to make sure that we're echoing the same sentiment. If it's something that we're putting on the village's webpage and they want to, you know, also put it on their personal webpage or their elected official webpage, they should be championing and saying the exact same thing.
Yeah, so my thoughts, you know, my first question to this question again was, is it a problem that they're posting something on social media? Is it public information? And, you know, elected officials want to be the first to know. They feel they've earned that right by being elected. They want to be the first to know, and they definitely do not want other people to know things before them, especially their constituents. So they're typically anxious to share news and information that they learn about. The question for you as a planner is, you know, is this information ready to be publicly shared or not? We have developed our own thresholds here in Champaign of when something is, you know, okay to be public, such as when somebody has applied for a zoning permit, when a building permit has been applied for, those kinds of things. Typically, when information that is submitted to our office is otherwise available through a Freedom of Information Act request. That seems to be kind of a threshold for us. Nevertheless, there are times where you meet with elected officials before that. Say you're contemplating providing an incentive for a retail development and you're taking the temperature of council members one by one. You know, you hope that they respect the confidentiality of that until it gets into a public forum. But, you know, increasingly these days, especially with social media, we have kind of adopted an attitude of, well, if you tell your elected official something, you better expect it's going to get leaked somewhere in some form or some way. So I think we all have to be even a little more careful about what we share, but I do appreciate that that is a very fine line to walk, because you also don't want your elected officials to feel like you are withholding information from them and you're being secretive. So, you know, every community should spend a little time thinking about where are the thresholds of when information is clearly able to be shared and be public, and where is it not, and how do we get our elected officials involved and keep things you know, confidential when they need to be. But generally speaking, in our community, the stuff that our elected officials share is stuff that is, you know, right on the cusp of being public knowledge and hasn't really been a problem. But the bigger problem is when something is kind of leaked and, you know, you chase around figuring out how they found out that that's happening and where, and that just gets really frustrating.
Rob, when you say leaked, are these projects that haven't hit the street, so to speak? They're not public, the application hasn't been formally submitted?
Yeah, correct. It hasn't met that threshold, like, you know, there hasn't been a building permit. You know, oftentimes we know of projects that are coming before there's a building permit submitted. You may sit down with, you know, a developer of a Chick-fil-A, you know, to talk about the zoning rules. So, you know, a Chick-fil-A is coming to that corner. And then, you know, often things become rumors and they're the worst kept secrets in town, right? You know, in regular meetings that, you know, we may have with council members, they may ask you about these things. Oh, you know, we hear there's a Chick-fil-A coming. Is that true? It's a tricky line to walk to provide right information, but not withhold information from your elected officials. But establishing a good culture of when it's okay to share and when it's not is really important. Not easy to do, but important to do.
Yeah, definitely. And I work for a community that's much smaller than where you are. And so for us, we have a weekly update that goes out to our elected officials every department puts together a weekly update. And so when we have these sort of pre-app meetings with a potential applicant / developer, we put that in our weekly update that our plan commission sees, as well as our mayor and village board of trustees sees. So that way they're getting the information from staff, hopefully first, that, you know, hey, no, you know, so if someone grabs them at church and say, hey, I heard a Chick-fil-A is coming in. Yeah, they can speak to it and says, yeah, well, staff has had some preliminary, you know, discussions to kind of kick the can to see if there's any interest, but, you know, monitor our website or, you know, chat with me in a couple of Sundays. And if I hear anything, I'll let you know. And so we try to get ahead of a lot of that information by doing weekly updates to our elected officials and our appointing officials, so that, again, we're trying to stay ahead of information that's being disseminated to our public. We had time for one more or no?
I think we are out of time actually, but the good thing is, and everyone on the call, please, just as a reminder, we will be sharing a PDF of the Jamboard so you can see all of these responses. And we can add the information included in the chat too as part of the responses, just so everyone can refer to this in the future. Paula did provide links to the CM credits and the survey, so please, as a reminder, please, don't forget to log in your CM credits and also fill out the survey so we can get some feedback from you for our future sessions. Future sessions in the PlanNotes series, keep an eye out for those because a lot of your questions that you submitted, we did not even get to today. So there will be future opportunities for those. So thank you so much, Kim and Rob, for providing these responses. I know your feedback and your experience is so helpful for all of us. And it's a good discussion for all of us to have together so we can handle these situations in the future. So thank you everyone for joining us today.
Thank you very much, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I had fun. Thank you so much for inviting me.